once again. I did it again. All right. Sorry about that music. That messes up the intro. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I am your host, DL, America's most objective and technically challenged libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time this evening. As I said last night, it is election season, and that means interviewing candidates. So I'm excited to announce my guest tonight, Ted Brown, who's running for U.S. Senate in Texas. So please welcome Ted Brown to the show. Let's get him in here. All right. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Well, good, DL. How are you? And thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm doing very well. And absolutely, it's my pleasure, sir. I'm looking forward to a great conversation tonight.
Yes.
So we're going to get right into it. You've been a Libertarian Party member since 1979. You're basically
Yes.
an OG, right? Like
Yeah.
you,
Well,
you,
a lifer. Yeah.
right. Like, so that's a long time, far longer than I've been in. And I think that's amazing. So first question up. What's inspired you to run for U.S. Senate as a libertarian, and how does your background in the party over the last however many years shape your approach to reducing government overreach in Washington?
Well, I mean, I joined when I was an 18-year-old college freshman way back in those days,
Mhm,
and I've been involved my entire adult life. And it's been very important to me to advocate for liberty. And I've run for office quite a few times
mhm.
because I always think that that's the best way to get out the libertarian message. Most voters are not all that interested in politics, so every now and again, like every other year in the fall during the election season, some people tune in and are interested in politics. And if we don't have any candidates to let them know that we're there, that there's an alternative point of view and an alternative to the powers that be, then they would never hear about us or never know about those alternatives. So that's why I've sought to run for office all these years. Also, as an activist, one of my main activism points was to recruit candidates. So for the
Mhm.
last 30 or 40 years, I've been recruiting other libertarians, and I've recruited hundreds and hundreds of candidates to run for office to represent us at the federal, state, and local levels. So it's vitally important to advocate for liberty. As for the Senate race here in Texas, I ran in 2024 against Ted Cruz, and I was the better Ted. You can see on my poster
Right.
behind me there, it's the poster from the last election. And I got a record number of votes for a Libertarian Senate candidate in Texas, 267,000 votes. And I think a lot of people were looking for an alternative to the main parties, because what other party is going to advocate for, or what other candidate or party is going to advocate for personal freedom, economic freedom, and a non-interventionist foreign policy, basically limited government across the board. And you don't get that from D's and R's. So that's why I'm running again this time, because if anything, government, it's gotten worse since the 2024 election. I mean,
Right.
the Trump regime is just terrible, and they have no interest in protecting the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. And with Trump governing by executive order and by intimidating all the Republicans in Congress, he's just running roughshod over the separation of powers and the country that we're supposed to be, where Congress makes the laws and the president implements them, not the president ruling by decree. I'm very much against any one person ruling by decree. I mean, we fought a revolution about that in 1776, and I don't think anybody wants that today, except for a bunch of bootlickers in the Republican Party, it seems.
Right. Wow. That was one heck of a summary. I mean, I don't
Mm.
think I could have said it better myself. That was amazing. So thank you so much for that. Now, if I understand correctly, I took a look, and it looks like over in Texas there, because I'm in Florida, over in Texas, you guys have over 20 candidates that are running for office this year, at least. I
Yes.
assume there's some more that'll be coming and getting their names up on the website. Is that correct? About
Well,
20 or more?
there's 20 or so candidates, and unfortunately, it's the smallest number we've ever had, I think.
Mm,
Because what happened was in Texas, the Republicans have been running the state for over 30 years, and they don't like us for some reason.
mm,
They seem to think that we take votes away from them, which isn't necessarily true. In fact, polling has showed that when there's no libertarian in the race, it's like a third, a third, and a third. Like a third will vote Democrat, a third will vote Republican, and a third won't even vote in that race. But they have made it more difficult for us to run candidates. About
mm.
starting in 2020, they required us to pay filing fees, and some of them were very, very large. And they never requested that before because we don't use the primary system. We have our own conventions. We nominate by convention, so we've never cost the state anything. They just want to just keep us off the ballot. And so,
Right.
like for example, I had to pay a $5,000 filing fee to run for the
Ugh.
Senate, and that keeps a lot of people off. And our statewide candidates, like governor and all, that's 3,750. It's very difficult to get people to run. So luckily, we had some people raising money, so we have a full slate of statewide candidates. But we do have fewer candidates than usual running for Congress, running for
Mhm.
state legislature. And this is a year when it'd be great to have more candidates because there's a lot more dissatisfaction than ever with the major parties. Because obviously people are upset with the Trump administration, then they're upset with the Democrats for not being a proper opposition party to the Trump administration. I mean,
Right.
what a bunch of weaklings and duds, trying to fight against what's going on. When you're threatened with violations of your most fundamental liberties, you don't act like Chuck Schumer. It's like,
Right.
I mean, come on, that guy is useless, absolutely useless.
Right. So, speaking of Texas and
Mhm.
libertarians, looks like there's a libertarian challenger for the U.S. Senate run. Am I correct on that? Daniel
That's
Mark
true.
Sims.
Very
And
surprised about that. A guy named Mark Sims, who's not been involved in the party, never heard
mhm,
of him. He's running for the nomination. He's,
okay,
he's a very vigorous fellow and all, but he doesn't have a history in the party. He doesn't have a record of advocating for liberty. So I'm very confident. I think my fellow libertarians here in Texas will see that I have a lifetime of activism and a lifetime of advocacy, and successfully within the realm of libertarianism, because it's very difficult
right.
to gain a lot of ground. But in expressing our views and getting that out there, because I've run a lot of times. I can answer just about any question from a libertarian perspective. And I've been like a political junkie and a news junkie since I was a teenager, so I can
Mhm.
pretty much very familiar with the issues, federal and state issues, that are in the election. So I think I'm the best candidate and could better represent the party. And so
Gotcha.
at our convention in Abilene on April 10th through 12th is when the delegates will decide.
Okay. Well, that answers my next question, which was going to be, how are you a better candidate than Daniel Mark Sims? But it sounds like you've already got that out of the way. So let's move on to the current incumbent and candidate for the same seat, John Cornyn. What is the top issue that separates you from Senator Cornyn?
Well, there's a few things with Cornyn. First of all, he's like a lifetime politician. He's been serving in one office or another for 35 years, and he's like completing 24 years in the Senate. I mean, he's the poster boy for term limits. He's 74 years old, and I think it's about time for him to retire. And basically, he's been a conservative, of course, but he's also been someone who's been willing to work across the aisle over his time in the Senate. And boy, that doesn't go over very well with these MAGA people and the red meat Republican base here in Texas. And that's why he's got two challengers. And the main one is Attorney General Ken Paxton, who's really corrupt, and he's a crook, and he was impeached one time, but the
Mm,
Republican base still loves the guy because he always sues he sued the Obama administration, and he sued the Biden administration, and he sues everybody in the state just so he can have a press release a day to advocate for the Republican base and just throw red meat out there. And so we'll see what happens. There's the third Republican, Wesley Hunt, who's a congressman. So they're going to have they'll have a runoff in May probably to finally decide who's going to run there. They're just going to spend a fortune. Cornyn is just not popular for reaching across the aisle, and now he's trying to act like Trump's best buddy when he actually
mm,
called for Trump to not run again, and so he's trying to live that down. It's pretty
wow.
funny. It's pretty funny him trying to like show he's a buddy of Trump's, and Trump won't endorse anybody so far in that race. So
Mm,
that's why tens of millions are being spent by all these candidates. So. And then there's two Democrats, so they should be able to decide in the March primary who their candidate is.
mhm,
And yeah, one is Jasmine Crockett, who's the congresswoman, who's sort of a bomb throwing kind of in her rhetoric against Republicans. And then there's James Tallarico, who's a young Presbyterian ministry student, who's a state legislator, who's very religious, and he's like in the legislature, he's amusingly called out these right-wing Republicans who are supposedly know the Bible, and he shows that they don't know anything about the Bible. It's really hilarious, some of
Wow.
the clips, and he's become popular because of that. And so we'll see what happens with that. So it's an interesting lineup. So I have no idea who my opponents are going to be yet, and we won't know for sure finally until after May, pretty much.
Right. Do you have any idea? Yeah. Would you be willing to guess who they might be, or not yet?
Not yet. I think it'll be Tallarico for the Democrats,
Okay.
but and he has a better chance of winning the general election because he can try to appeal to some of the religious folk in Texas, and there's certainly a lot of people in that category. And the Democrats often fall down on the job on that because they're considered to be, I don't know, I don't know. It just seems like the Republicans try to monopolize that side of the equation.
Gotcha. Let's jump on over to some of the issues.
Yes.
Immigration. Texas is a border state. So, first question, what is the federal government doing wrong that's, for Texas, if you will?
Well, they always seem to be wrong. For example, like during the Biden administration, we saw people got so upset, understandably so, with all these immigrants that were like swimming across the Rio Grande and crawling through the desert, and all of them, and then congregating in these small Mexican border towns. And of course, people got upset about that.
Right.
They were told that they couldn't come to a port of entry to apply for refugee status, which is absolutely absurd. How can that be? Why would it be better to like swim across a river than it would be to go to a building that's on a paved road with U.S. government employees in it and sign in? I mean, if they would have done that at the points of entry, Texas or California, or at airports or at ports or whatever for the country, it wouldn't look like the disaster it was that caused the backlash that caused the Trump to say, oh, we got to get rid of all these people. It's because they came in such a goofy, haphazard way that I think drove a lot of that. People saw that it was like chaotic, and they said, we shouldn't have this going on, and we shouldn't have had it come in that way. They should have had a much more orderly fashion and a much more easy way to come here legally, instead of like just hit and miss, crawling across the desert, climbing under a barbed wire fence and hope to see a border patrol agent. I mean, how absurd can you get? But now it's gone so far back the other way. And it's almost impossible for anybody to come here legally now. It seems like the average person, their applications are being ignored, and it seems like everybody's be afraid to come now with the way immigrants are being treated by the Trump administration. This massive increase in ICE, which I'm totally opposed to. I mean, they're now the largest federal law enforcement agency, and as you probably know, libertarians are pretty much against almost every federal law enforcement agency. If you look at our platform, we want to abolish just about all of them, and so
Right.
ICE is in that list as well. It's gotten so that they having these untrained people. They're not going after specific immigrants. They seem to be having sweeps in cities and just grabbing anybody off the street, immigrant or citizen alike. And it's just so ridiculous how they're abusing the public that it's actually turned the tide in public opinion. People are actually against the way ICE is doing this. And people now, there's actually a plurality of the public that want to abolish ICE, the same as libertarians do. It's amazing that they could do things so badly and so evilly. I mean, the point of the Trump administration is to be as cold, cruel, callous, and just don't care about people. They just don't care about anybody as an individual, about their needs, their rights, their medical condition, their families. They're just absolutely nothing. And as a libertarian, I believe in individual rights and universal human rights. I mean, I don't think anyone's illegal just because they're from another country. Sure, there are people that didn't come here and follow all the rules, but like I said, it's almost impossible to come here legally. I think it should be a way easier to come here legally, like an Ellis Island style immigration system, where people would come to points of entry, whether it's at the border or at an airport or at a port or whatever, and then sign in like they did back in Ellis Island days. And most would probably get in. They'd have to be checked for whether they're criminals, whether they're terrorists, whether they have contagious diseases or whatever. But most would be eligible to come in. And then if people didn't come in that way and they still tried to sneak in, you'd know those people were up to no good then. But if 90-some% they would be let in. The normal people who want to come, not the bad guys, would come in through the ports of entry. So I welcome immigrants to this country. They're a positive. I mean, it's like the Republicans are saying, "Oh, they've destroyed our nation and all this," but they haven't. This is
Right.
immigration is a positive for this country, positive for our economy, and these folks are not trying to take. They're not trying to destroy our country. They just come here for a better life for themselves and their kids. They want to work. They want to get ahead. And both of my grandfathers were immigrants. And I certainly am, I think my family has done very well in this country over the last 130 years or whatever. And people need that opportunity. I mean, anybody that's a bad guy, certainly they should be thrown out. But I also question some of the people they call criminals that they want to throw out. Sure, if you're a murderer or a rapist or an armed robber or something like that, sure, throw them out. But I'm suspecting that some of the people they call the worst of the worst had a drug offense 25 years ago or something like that. They're saying, "Oh, these awful criminals, throw them out."
Right.
I'd like to see all the rap sheets on all these people they're accusing of being criminals. I'm very, very suspicious on that. And as you know, libertarians don't believe all these things should be illegal anyway. A lot of
Right.
things that are all these victimless crime laws, and I think a lot of people got swept up in those over the years.
So let me ask you then, in Texas, because I'm not familiar with Texas, but I know
Right.
Texas is a fairly red state. So
Yeah.
what is the vibe, or what, let's put it back, what was the vibe when ICE started rolling out into communities? And then what is it now in Texas? Like, have people shifted? Were they more supportive, less supportive?
Well, you're right about when it rolled out, like Republicans around the country, and even a lot of Democrats were saying, "Yeah, good thing. Let's get these ICE guys out there. Let's round up the worst of the worst and send these criminals out." I mean, you can understand how the average person would think that. I mean, sure, they hear that and they say, "Oh, yeah, why are these criminals in our country?" But you would hope that if they're an actual criminal, that they're in prison. They shouldn't be wandering around on the streets. They should be in prison. If they're I don't want them taken out of prison, because if you send them back to their country and you foist some murderer on another country, I mean, they need to serve their prison sentences and then be deported if they're convicted of like murder or rape or some
Mhm.
horrible crime or something. And so after ICE started behaving the way that they are, the whole country polled says that their plurality is, or a majority is against those tactics, and a plurality want to even abolish ICE. Now, I have not seen that they polled that in Texas specifically, like state by state. I haven't seen a state by state poll for
Okay.
any state on that issue. And that's actually a good point. I'd like to see that, whether Texans in general have changed their minds. Now, there's reports that a lot of Hispanic voters in Texas are really turning on the Republicans. They voted for Trump, which they never have voted Republican before. And they said, this guy, we like this Trump guy in 2024. He had a big boost in the Hispanic vote and had won 56% of the vote in Texas, which
Hmm.
was less than a lot of places, but still pretty substantial. And he turned a lot of Hispanic areas into Republican areas for Congress and state
Right.
legislature and things like that. And now it's going to probably go back the other way. Those guys are really upset with
Oh,
him.
wow.
Polling in
Wow.
in races, specific races, not in the whole state.
Right, right. So when
Yeah.
you talk to people, what is the reception that you get when you are talking to them and you're talking about your position on immigration? How are people receiving you?
Well, not too
Not
well,
libertarians, though. Not
unfortunately.
libertarians, like
I know.
non-libertarians. I mean.
I know, that's the thing. At this stage, I'm mostly talking to libertarians, and there's some disagreement amongst libertarians too.
Hmm.
Some actually are not as pro immigration on the subject as I am. That was the case in the 2024 election, and
Hmm.
then it was maybe a little bit more understandable, like I said, when our border towns were being overrun when they shouldn't have been. That should have been done in a much more orderly fashion that wouldn't have caused such turmoil and everything. But with the general public, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. It's very hard to get to speak to a lot of people in the general public when you're running for a statewide campaign, especially this early on, when there's not a lot of attention paid, certainly to the a third party candidate, when there's like these massive tens of millions of dollars being spent amongst the D's and
Hmm.
R's to nominate their candidate. So I think I'm very active on social media, especially on X, Twitter, and so I'm often like triggering somebody on there with the immigration views, and also on others. The other big issue, of course, that triggers people are foreign policy issues. So
Hmm.
those are ways of Well, I get the correct libertarian view out. You know what most libertarians believe on the subject. It certainly needs to be spoken to the public in a somewhat different way, depending on the audience or the best way to phrase that, whether it's a Democratic audience or a Republican audience.
Gotcha. So you get let's say you get to convention, you win the nomination, you go on,
Hmm.
you're the candidate for the Libertarian Party, then you go on. Let's say you win the election, right? You are now the
Uh,
U.S. senator, and
all
this will be a
right,
great
yeah,
day, right? Like this is exciting. But now there's time. Now it's time to do some work, right? And
yes,
we're not going to get what we want right away. I mean, poor Thomas Massey's struggling just to get people to read the damn bills.
yeah.
So, so there's a big uphill challenge. So for you, you're in office. What kind of policy do you think would work to benefit Texas and overall, consequently, the
Yeah.
United States that could happen during your first term?
Well, first of all, the one senator that I would consult with would be Rand Paul of Kentucky, because he's
Mhm.
certainly by far the best senator, though it is a very low bar when we're talking about the U.S. Senate.
Right.
But he's the one that could probably guide me through some of the procedures that he uses pretty well to oppose legislation, because he's one of the best opposers there is in the U.S. Senate. But one thing I'm noting, and one of the main things I'm saying in the campaign, is that I'm the only candidate who's not beholden to any special interest groups or corrupt party leaders. I would be a completely independent voice for liberty in Washington. I'm not going to be schmoozing with lobbyists or raising money to be reelected. I mean, I'm retired from my career in the insurance industry. I'm not looking for a new career. You know, if I would get reelected, fine, but I'm not there to get reelected. I'm there to serve my one term and to do what I can to fight for liberty. And if that merely consists of stopping bills from getting passed, that's enough, because as President Calvin Coolidge said, it's far better to oppose bad bills than to get good ones passed, because a bad bill can really wreck the country. And we've seen that with some bills that over the years that have really had horrible unintended consequences. Or then again, maybe they were intended.
Right.
Who
Right.
knows?
Yes.
But
Yeah, yes.
either way, there are bad consequences. You know.
Right.
So I would be, if I have to, I'm going to learn the Senate rules. If there's filibustering and senators have all this power to put holds on nominees and holds on bills, and for example, remember when Senator Tuberville put a hold on military promotions? I
Mhm.
was surprised, that the Senate approved military promotions, but I think, hey, this one guy just is holding it up. I mean, I could do that, with something else, with other nominees or other bills. And it wasn't like the Senate said, we don't want him to do that. Let's change the Senate rules. No, senators love having that power. They love being able to say,
Right.
nope, I don't want this guy nominated for an office in my state, or, there's a lot of different reasons, but they want to keep the prerogatives of the Senate. And that's why the filibuster stays in there, which it should, because it protects minority rights from being run roughshod over by the majority. Which we're seeing right now with that bill to fund Homeland Security now.
Mhm.
There's going to be a government shutdown. I mean, we're speaking on February 12th, but on the 14th, there's supposed to be a shutdown because Homeland Security, including ICE and FEMA and all that, is not going to be funded. So there's not enough votes right now to pass that, which is good. I'd shut it down as far as I'm
Right.
concerned. That's the kind of thing I would do a lot of. I think it's a positive thing to shut down the government and to try to repeal as much of it as possible. And that's what I would work on. I mean, if I have to be negative, I'll be negative if it's going to promote liberty. But I'm going to promote anything that promotes liberty, and I'm going to oppose anything that negates liberty.
Sounds good to me. Let's move on to foreign policy.
Yes.
So I'm going to read from your website just to kind of lay the foundation for my next question here. So it says,
Mhm.
libertarians favor a policy of non-intervention in the affairs of other nations. U.S. troops should be here to protect this country. Instead, there are 170,000 U.S. troops stationed in 150 different countries around the globe, in the Middle East, Europe, Japan, South Korea. Libertarians would bring all the troops home and advise other countries to pay for their own defense. We should not be involved in alliances like NATO. So, because you would be a senator, like, a libertarian senator, which is
Mhm.
very rare, what is your pitch to Republican and Democrat voters who may be hesitant to support such a policy?
Well, what's interesting is each of those parties has an idea of which interventions they want.
Hmm.
So, say for example, Democrat. Well, it seems like most everybody wants to intervene in the Middle East, for example. in
Right.
one fashion or another. That's why we have like so many military bases and troops over there. I would certainly shut all those down. I'm opposed to war with Iran. I'm opposed to continuing to fund Israel with their massive destruction campaign in Gaza and the West Bank and such, and other nations they're bombing around there. And I certainly get no contributions from special interests backing that, whether it's APAC on Israel or the military-industrial complex in general to fund weapons to just like every side practically in every war. There's bombings going on. We bombed 7 countries last year, including like 100 times in Somalia, which nobody even pays any attention to. We should have a bombing moratorium. But I can appeal to rank and file Democrats, I think, by saying, hey, your party leaders join with Republicans to blow a bunch of brown people to smithereens all over the third world, and I certainly don't favor that. We shouldn't be doing that. And Republicans, a lot of Trump supporters were anti-intervention. They were against wars, and then here Trump has just turned around on his supporters, like on a lot of different subjects, and like this trying to seize Venezuelan oil and attacking Iran and doing all of this is just I think it tries the patience of some of his supporters, but some of them are just wait for the plan to work or something.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing some like 8-dimensional chess from Star Trek or something, that is ridiculous. He doesn't know what the heck he's doing except for backing the military-industrial complex and feathering his own nest, as far as I can tell, he and his family and his supporters. But so I've been bringing up issues like not having a war with Iran, ending all our involvement in the Middle East, financial and military. But what came before that was the Venezuela situation, which is insane. How Trump's people had the military bomb these boats in the mostly in the Caribbean and then later
Mm-hmm.
off the west coast of Mexico, saying that they were like drug boats coming to the U.S. And there was absolutely no evidence ever presented of that. They never said who was on the boats, what the cargo was, where they were going, anything. They just they just throw it out in their hot breath and say we're saving the nation from fentanyl. Well, Venezuela doesn't produce fentanyl. Well, they produce
Right.
cocaine. Well, okay. Then they said, well, the boat might be going to Europe, not to the U.S., and that's certainly none of our business. I mean, this is like over thousands of miles from our shores. I mean, if the boats were like trying to dock at Key West, Florida, or Mobile, Alabama, or something, I could see our Coast Guard being involved, but not when they're so far away. It has absolutely nothing to do with us. It was absolute first-degree murder against these people. And even there's like a citizen of Trinidad, of all a friendly country, their
Mm-hmm.
family is suing that guy's family is suing the U.S. now for wrongful death because they killed some fisherman from Trinidad, which is a friendly country. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But then that did make sense when we saw this attack on the Capitol there and seizing the President Maduro and killing 80 to 100 Venezuelans during that
Mm-hmm.
attack, and then taking the guy into custody. That's absolutely nuts. And then trying to take Venezuelan oil. I mean, it's absurd. We have no right to do any of that. I mean, I posted, how would we like it if Maduro announced that Trump was in violation of Venezuelan law for murdering those fishermen and had a paramilitary operation seize Trump at Mar-a-Lago and take him into custody to stand trial in Caracas. I mean, that'd be nice, actually, but I don't think any American would put up with that. Neither would I. That's not how we
Right.
don't want our president seized by a foreign government. And even no matter how bad their president is, I don't think they do either. I mean, you just can't do that around the world. And the U.S. thinks we can do that. For decades, we've been doing, say, oh, we can do whatever we want anywhere in the world, violate international law, do whatever we darn well please. And Trump is just another one in a long line of presidents that's doing that, but just in the most crude, like I said before, his way is like the crudest, most ridiculous way of doing things, cruel, callous, etc. So certainly, and then this brings up another issue with Maduro being
Mm-hmm.
charged with a drug offense in the U.S. The Republicans are so concerned about these birthright citizenship, where they're trying to define what being under the jurisdiction of the U.S. is. Like, is a child of someone who's not here legally under the jurisdiction of the U.S.? Well, what about Maduro is most certainly not under the jurisdiction of the
Right.
U.S., and they're charging him with a crime. He has no obligation to obey U.S. laws. He's never been here except for some trips to the UN where he's under diplomatic protection. I mean, he's not under the jurisdiction of the U.S. under any way, shape, or form.
Right.
they should. Yeah. Now, some other country wants him now. Give him to another country, but we shouldn't have him. We have no
Right.
right to try him for anything. And oh, there was that Honduran president that Trump pardoned, the other drug lord president.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You remember that one? We have no
Yes.
jurisdiction over him either. That was a ridiculous conviction. Also, he was the president of another country. I mean,
Right.
come on, that was ridiculous.
Yeah,
Also,
it was interesting because with Maduro, what a lot of
yeah.
people the argument that people made, which I rejected, is that they said, well, he's a diplomat, he's got diplomatic immunity, but then the Trump administration said, well, he's not the rightful leader of Venezuela, so therefore he
Mhm.
doesn't have diplomatic immunity. And I was like, okay, so then like what? Anybody who's not a head of state anywhere in the world is subject to the US jurisdiction? That seems a bit crazy to me. So,
Yeah.
what do you say to people? Because one of the arguments that I hear from friends and people that they may find a lot of these actions distasteful, but they seem to
Mhm.
tolerate it because they feel like, hey, if the US isn't out flexing its muscle, somebody else will flex it in some way, like China or whomever, right?
Mhm.
So, what is your response to people when they say that, that might convince them, you know what, maybe it isn't a good idea.
Well, they need to look historically at what happens. I mean, we've done this quite a bit, and some of the U.S. actions has blowback. It has unintended consequences. And I remember Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld during the Iraq War say they have the unknown unknowns. They don't even know the things they don't know that are
Right.
going to happen when they go in and do these interventions. I mean, the Iraq War was crazy. It caused so much turmoil in the Middle East, killed between 300,000 and a million Iraqis. Um, and caused so many people to become refugees, and it created ISIS, which became some terrorist organization, cutting a swath of terror and killing more people in the Middle East. And it led to the Syrian situation, where they had millions of refugees. In fact, a lot of the immigration to Europe and to the U.S. comes from situations that we've helped cause, where refugees are created and people want to immigrate from those countries. There's like cause and effect on some of that. And libertarians have been saying for years, including myself, I was opposed to the first Gulf War and the regular, the Iraq War and Afghanistan and all these interventions, and they were a disaster. I mean, we didn't achieve anything really, except for, like I said, killing a lot of people and creating economic turmoil and refugees. I mean, just have to look at the record, shall we say? That what we've done is not help. We really haven't helped. We haven't helped very many people that way.
Right. And last question on the issue of foreign policy. You become elected senator. Would you support bringing up Donald Trump on charges for war crimes?
Well, maybe he and a lot of his people. We'd have to add on people from previous administrations also. I'd like to
Mhm.
bring in everybody from the Bush administration as
Mhm.
well. There's a pile of war criminals coming out of that group. Bush himself, and a lot of those people who worked for him are no longer alive. But you can go back a long way, and our presidents have been committing war crimes for decades. I
Mhm.
mean, and the people that work for them following orders, which is not a defense under, Nuremberg, not a defense if you're just following orders. And we've committed war crimes.
Mhm.
And the U.S. is not a member of the International Criminal Court at The Hague, which I'm not suggesting that we join it, but the U.S. is aggressively opposing that court, trying to indict and charge and have trials of war criminals from other countries, like Israel, most specifically. And Trump has put sanctions on the judges from the International Criminal Court,
Mhm.
which is absurd. They can't even get a bank account or buy food or something, and they're just doing their jobs. They're trying to bring war criminals to justice. So the point that the U.S. never joined the International Criminal Court is that we said that we could try our own war criminals, and we can. It's certainly illegal. This is some of the actions that Trump and members of the military have performed, and they could go on trial for war crimes. Now, in the first Trump administration, there was actually a soldier who was convicted of war crimes in Iraq. Trump pardoned him. He
Mm.
doesn't care about our war crimes, because he doesn't think it's a crime to abuse brown people in other countries. He's glad to abuse people in this country with like how ICE is treating people at these camps and everything.
Right.
So he doesn't care about human rights in any way. And so Yeah, I would certainly charge these people with war crimes. What I suspect Trump is going to do before he leaves office is what Biden did, and that's just pardon everybody preemptively. He's just going to pardon all kinds of people before he leaves office. So there's no hope for any kind of justice for the victims of these crimes.
Right, and it's a shame. Let's talk about education real quick. On your
Hmm.
site, you said, "I will work to abolish the federal Department of Education." I love the sound of that. However, Reagan
Hmm.
tried. Trump, I guess you can say he sort of tried. I don't know if I would call it trying. And other notable figures have either called for it or made some sort of
Hmm.
attempt, via Congress or wherever, drafting legislation and
Yeah.
whatnot. What would be your plan to get it done, or what would it look like to like? I know ultimately abolishing it would be getting rid of it entirely, not shifting responsibilities to other,
Right.
other departments in the government and whatnot. But what would be your plan that you think might actually stand a chance, whereas others were not able to?
Right. Well, first of all, the reason you're correct that Ronald Reagan, right from the start of the when Department of Education was created, said abolish the Department of Education. But then when he got in there, he and the Republicans, they said, wait a minute, we can use the department for conservative ends. He
Mhm,
had William Bennett as the Secretary of Education. Trying to put conservatism into education. That's been the case all along. The people that you'd think would abolish it, the Republicans, use it for their own ends. And so once people see they can get their way in public policy through these departments, they just keep getting bigger and bigger. And then when Elon Musk went in there with Doge, trying to like cut
mhm,
the Department of Education, I said, wow, he's going to try to cut the Department of Education. But that wouldn't work really because the Congress appropriated money for that department, and you'd have to have them abolish it. And the thing that got me is Doge was doing their work like 2 or 3 weeks before the end of a continuing resolution, and so they were saying cut this, cut that, and then Trump signed a continuing resolution that restored all of that funding
mhm.
that they had just cut. It's a useless operation there to try to cut a government department. Of course, Democrats will never cut any government department, even ones they don't like ICE, and the Republicans are using the Department of Education now to promote all their right-wing agenda, social agenda. That Project 2025. They want to have women barefoot, pregnant, not voting. Back in the dark ages or something, and other areas like that. They don't want to teach any kind of cosmopolitan ideas in the public schools. And of course, from a libertarian point of view, I believe that I certainly favor private schools. Parents
Mhm.
should be, I believe in educational choice. Parents should be able to choose their kids' education. So there should be plenty of competition with the government schools. There's no doubt about that. The Department of Education does not really finance much of that. They never educate anybody. And so I need to use the argument, to abolish the agency about they don't educate anybody. They just have mandates on education departments in all the states and local school boards. There's only one aspect of it that was brought to my attention that might be interesting to note, and that's where they're trying to protect kids from being like crippled children from being abused in the system or something like that.
Mhm.
Handicapped kids and all. And so there probably needs to be something done to protect them. But if they're being harmed in some way, then that should go to like the Justice Department for prosecution or something. You don't need a separate
Right.
education
Yeah.
department for that if kids are truly being abused. But of course, now we see the Department of Justice doesn't care anything about abused kids, so maybe that's the wrong place to put it.
Right. Yeah, it's an absolute sham. So, one more question here, and then I've got like on policy and Senate and whatnot. You
Hmm.
get elected, and man, my screen keeps flickering. You get elected. Let me back up. Right now, we see that the most, if you want to call him libertarian, or if you don't, whatever, but the best congressman I say is Thomas Massey, and he is taking a lot of arrows right now.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
are you how prepared are you to share some of them arrows with him?
Yeah, Thomas Massey is really great. I mean, I don't agree with him 100% of the time, but he's
Mhm.
by far the best member of the House. He sure has got some balls there to
Right.
go up against all these powerful interests. But I think the people in his district in rural Kentucky love him, and he's going to get reelected. He's just I think people usually like their own congressman, and in his
Mhm.
case, it's probably good to do so. But yeah, he in the House and Rand Paul in the Senate. they're like the only ones that really are consistently speaking the truth on these things. Well, of course, some Democrats on certain issues. I'm good with some of them, like this Ro Khanna, the congressman from
Hmm.
California that's been fighting with
Right.
Massey to get the Epstein files out. He's very principled, I think, in his way. I think there are a lot of principled leftist Democrats, and we overlap on quite a few issues. So I'm not going to hide from that. I mean, I don't think the Libertarian Party is a right wing or Republican party. Or a left wing or Democrat party. It's a pro freedom party. And, there's plenty of Democrats that believe in civil liberties, and I'll work with them. And, plenty of Republicans that don't, forget
Right.
them on that regard. But some of them do believe still in economic freedom, but even though not enough of them, they've gone over to this Trump authoritarianism. But the point is that I'll certainly work with any senators that want to promote freedom and oppose any ones that don't. And I'll try to, filibuster against their bills or use whatever, dilatory tactics I can to prevent bad bills from coming out. It might get down to that, because I sure don't see as a third party independent senator who well, I mean, if I'm elected, it would be a big tsunami, and there might probably be more of us. I would hope
Right.
other libertarians might make it. That would be wonderful to have two or three or four of us. That would really just upset the whole apple cart there. We'd all have to make sure we didn't travel on the same airplane,
Right.
or on the same train or something,
Right.
because we'd be very, very dangerous to the.
Libertarian continuity.
That's right. Right. Yeah, we'd be dangerous to the establishment, though. So yeah, so I'm willing to see. That's the thing. I don't care about the special interests attacking me or denouncing me or anything. The only problem is, like I said, you do have to worry about violence, because some of these people get these supporters of these other parties get crazy. I mean, they have
Hmm.
some nutty people who want to, they attack public officials, and they might call in those swatting things and
Hmm.
doxing and
Right.
get people to come to your house to burn a cross on the lawn or whatever they want to do. There's a history of that sort of thing,
Right.
and so, certainly that's something to worry about. I mean, I've been married for a long time. My wife and I, don't want somebody to burn down our house or to shoot at us or anything. But, I think it's vital to promote these causes. And I mean, I'm not a kid anymore. I'm 65. I mean, it's not like, I'd be as worried as I would be, like, 20 years ago or something.
Sure. All right. Sounds good. I mean, it sounds like you're ready to get in there and, take some hits and give some hits, and I like it. I think that's what we need. We need more people that are willing to stand up to the establishment, their own party. I mean, it's easy to stand up to
Hmm.
somebody else's, the other party, but stand up to your own party and say, no, this is not acceptable. So I think that's awesome. And then, of course, in your case, we wouldn't have that many libertarians, so you get to step up to two parties and say no
Right. Well,
and
that's the
no.
thing. You're right, exactly. And I don't have to worry about Libertarian Party leaders telling me what to do or anything. I wouldn't listen to them anyway, because you know how Libertarians are. We don't
Right.
have to let anybody tell us what to do, and they'd be so happy that we have Libertarian senators. I think they'd say, go to it. Get her done.
Right. So going back to the election, you're the nominee. What is your weakest position against either your Democratic opponent or your Republican opponent, and how would you overcome that weakness?
Well, some might think it's the immigration issue,
Hmm.
but I don't know this time, because the pendulum has swung back. Texas was an extremely anti-immigration state last time because of all the massive number of immigrants coming in haphazardly, and I still had a record number of votes for a libertarian candidate with a radical pro-immigration platform. So
Hmm.
now, when people are more inclined towards being a little bit more, pro-immigration this time than they were last time, even in Texas, I think that might not be as much of a problem. Just in general, talking about libertarian views, the one that's hardest to convince the public about is sometimes environmental issues from a libertarian perspective, but those don't really come up very often. There's just so many throwing red meat kind of issues that people are interested in and talk
Hmm.
about. But I'd say if I was talking, like, say, to a more left-wing audience, and we're agreeing on foreign policy and on cannabis legalization and on ICE and immigration, and then they start asking me about economic issues, it's going to go south real fast, because
Right.
I do favor very limited government. For example, talking about how the national debt, 38 trillion, is not sustainable, and we have to cut every single government department, agency, program across the board, no exceptions whatsoever, military entitlement programs, everything. We just can't afford it. We absolutely can't afford it, and so that doesn't go over well with people that have that get money from the government, and
Mhm.
plenty of people do. They're dependent on it.
It's terrible. So
Mhm.
I would ask you your strongest, but I don't want to give it away for your opponents in case they're watching. So we'll just skip on over to what did I miss that you really wanted to talk about? Whatever topic, wherever you want to go with it.
Well, no, I just want to let the public know that you don't have to vote for Democrats and Republicans. And I mean, if people are listening to your show, I think they probably already know that.
Mhm.
But the public has been unsadly, conditioned for the last 160 years. It's like a two-pronged choice, Democrat or Republican. And these parties have, really, really wrecked the country. More so even in recent years than the past. Because often these parties like work to some of the congressmen and senators were able to join together and come up with compromises and things like that. Now there's like a different sense of reality on both sides of the political spectrum. The Democrats watch one set of news, and the Republicans watch another set of news, and they
Mhm.
believe different facts, which is ridiculous. And then libertarians are stuck out there saying, well, wait a minute, some of each of you is right now and again, but there's often issues where you're both wrong, and we need to show that there's something to be a little bit more objective. Don't just follow your favorite news network. Actually do some studying up on the issues. And if you look at like I get like social media feed and news feed from all over the political spectrum and all over the world too, for that
Mhm.
matter, to try to get as much of a perspective as I can. Though then again, it starts molding it. It molds it to what they think you want to see. So I gotta watch out for that. Because I'm looking for anti-government kind of attitudes, because I'm certainly anti-government. Um, but I just have to let people know that consider the alternatives. Don't be hidebound, and remember that one senator is not like a president or a governor. That's not like one of those stops their offices. You can vote Libertarian for senator or congressman or a state legislature when there's like lots of people holding that position. One person can't just announce that they're going to get their way. You have to like work with all the other members. So it's perfectly safe to elect a libertarian to the state legislature in your state. He's going to be like one of 100 or something like that. Let us serve and show the public that we can actually do the job and make a difference and promote liberty. They say, we're not going to vote for you because you can't win. Well, sure. If they think that, we're never going to win. So
Right.
we can't show them that we can do it. Obviously, we could change the voting systems to make it easier to win, but that's probably not going to happen. Like proportional representation, like in the parliamentary systems, where
Mhm.
say if we get 5% of the vote, we get 5% of the seats. That would be great. That would be absolutely wonderful. But the major parties are never going to allow that.
Right. All right, sir. I think it's close to our time here. So how can people support
Yes.
you?
Then go to my website at tedbrown.org, and they can follow me on Facebook, Ted Brown, Libertarian for U.S. Senator from Texas, or on X at Ted Brown Liberty. Please do.
All right, awesome. I'm going to put you backstage. If you need to go, that's fine. I understand. Or you can stick around and we can chat for a moment after the show. But I want to thank you for joining the show tonight and telling everybody about your run for Senate.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, sir. All right, folks, there you have it. Hope you enjoyed that show. Hope you found it informative and inspiring. Do me a favor, stop back by a little bit later and just drop a comment in the chat just to help out the algorithm a little bit, because that helps out the channel and it helps out the candidate. Spread the word so that other people can hear about the libertarian candidates. But with all that being said, that's a wrap for tonight, and I will see you in the next episode. Have a good one, folks. Stay safe and guard your liberty. You know that I'm all about supporting organizations that hold my values. Make sure you head on over to blackgunsmatter.shop. They've got apparel, stickers, and more. Use the code LibertyDad, all one word, at checkout to score a 10% discount. or just hit the referral link in the show notes. That'll make it so much easier. Remember, I'm not just a voice on a mic. I'm a dad who's working hard to deliver to you the best libertarian content. Connect with me on Linktree, where you'll find links to my Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee, because every bit helps keep this show rolling. Plus, you can find me on my other platforms to stay in the loop. With your help, this show, The Message of Liberty, will be seen and heard by more people. As always, I appreciate you tuning in and look forward to seeing